Good morning, everyone. My name is Lorna, and I'm an alcoholic. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak here. And to be quite honest with you, there's nowhere else I'd rather be than in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I want to thank Eileen and whoever else was responsible for selecting me to be the speaker, to one of the speakers this morning. And, when I first used to qualify, I used to say, and I used to believe. I used to say, well, I hope I can share something that's helpful to you this morning. And I hope that something I say is of help to you. And now I realize that, I'm not here to help you, that you have given me this opportunity of being helped. So that I can see myself reflected in your stories and hear myself speak. And that's the way a healing comes about, by giving it away. So thank you for this opportunity to get a little better. I think the thing to do is to share the classic thing and share my experience, my strength and my hope. And my experience. I woke up one Sunday morning in August, and I'd had a girlfriend staying with me, and I couldn't wait to get rid of her. And finally she left, and I went down to the local bodega, and I bought myself a container of Tropicana orange juice, and I came back upstairs and I fixed myself a jug of Tropicana and vodka. And I took a tumbler full of this elixir, and as it went down, it hit my stomach. And the effects came up through the tributaries of my body and hit my soul. My soul went, oh, thank God, we can keep them at bay one more day. We can keep this going one more day. And there was that wonderful feeling of comfort and at ease with the world, and that all-rightness with the world came over me. And something happened, and some kind of an awareness came through, and I remember thinking to myself, this is a morning drink. I am drinking in the morning. And the Chinese have a saying. They say that the beginning of wisdom is to call something by its correct name. Now, I had a drink in the morning many, many times, but I called it brunch. I called it toasting the bride. I called it gallery openings. I called it on the beach. I called it summertime. When I lived in Spain for a short while, and I had cognac in my coffee every morning, and I called it continental. But this I labeled. I said, this is a morning drink. And with that breath of clarity and truthfulness about exactly what I was doing, and it's only when we can be that truthful and clear that somehow, it gives the opening for healing and help. Hot on the heels of that came the disease, and the disease galloped in, and the disease said, oh, Lorna, what a fool you are. A woman like you, with the kind of mind you have, and the kind of job you have to hold down, and just the way of you, and the difference of you. Why do you struggle so? Why do you make life so difficult for yourself? Why don't you do this every morning? Why don't you give yourself this drink before you go to work? It would make life so much easier. And I thought, yes, that's absolutely true. Why do I always have to, do it the most difficult way? Why do I have to find the hardest way to do everything? I could do it this way. And with that thought, I could not release the glass from my hand. I physically could not put it down. And I had a brunch to go to that day, and I jumped in the shower, and I was showering, holding the glass out of the shower, soaping myself down. And another, God was at me that day, and I got another opportunity for identification. And suddenly I identified it was cigarette smoking. Now, I knew I had a problem with cigarettes. I was a very heavy smoker. And I knew I was a heavy smoker. I had no denial at all about smoking cigarettes. And I kept a diary in a compulsive sort of way. I heard that Queen Victoria kept a diary, and I thought, well, I'm very regal, I'll keep one too. So I'd kept a journal of this boring life of mine, day by day by day. And I was always writing, wish I could stop smoking. Stop smoking today. Haven't smoked for 2 weeks. Feel great about not smoking. Took a cigarette off Helen today. I'm only going to smoke other people's cigarettes. I only intend to, back to smoking. Oh, God, I wish I could stop smoking. So it was I always knew. And I was always fascinated with people that could smoke a cigarette, take a puff, and then put it in the ashtray and talk, and then pick it up again and take another puff, and like that. I couldn't do that. Once I lit the cigarette, it was in my hand until I'd finished it. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't release the cigarette for a moment. And in the end, I had a Dunhill cigarette holder so that I could keep it clenched in my teeth all the time. So, I sort of smoked like a Hollywood Nazi. And I just couldn't let go of cigarettes. And the clarity with the drink and the cigarette connected. I knew I couldn't let go. And I had done every disgusting thing imaginable with cigarettes. I had thrown them in the garbage, swearing them off in the night. And then in the morning I'd retrieve them from the garbage and dry them out in the oven, and get all the coffee grounds and things off them. I'd taken puffs of other people's cigarettes that had hacking coughs and God knows what. I mean, any length I'd gone to for cigarettes. And suddenly that connection came in that I was with this drink exactly the same way as I was with cigarettes. But it was like that flash, and out it went again. And that afternoon, I think actually that God looked out from heaven as he saw me swaying around in the shower and said, oy vey, this one, we've got to get her quickly. And I have a very Jewish sort of God. And anyway, that afternoon I'd gone to brunch and I'd had more vodka and orange juice. And to cut a very long story short, I was at an AA meeting late that afternoon. And I had been hanging around Alcoholics Anonymous. I'd gone to AA. I'd gone because my husband had finally walked out the door. And I thought it was the most fascinating thing he'd ever done. And it really caught my attention. And, I'd gone to meeting, someone said to me that they'd gone to a meeting of Al-Anon, and they said to me, Lorna, all the women sound just like you. And so I went to this meeting of Al-Anon, and it was all right. But I wanted to really find out how to get this guy back. So I started going to open AA meetings, as they suggested, to learn how the alcoholic thinks. Anyway, this particular afternoon, I had nowhere else to go. I just had not been invited anywhere. It was, we hit bottom. And it wasn't a particularly dramatic bottom. There weren't sirens going or anything like that, or I wasn't under the wheels of a car or anything. It was just one of those, it was one of those excruciating, lonely, terrible times. And we all know what bottom means for us. And, as an alcoholic, I can be in the most intimate act with another human being and feel screamingly alone. And I can be on a beach, I can be in the desert all by myself and feel very filled. So it doesn't really matter, and we can't kind of qualify what that bottom is. But anyway, for me, it was just a very lonely day. And I went to this meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, and a woman spoke. And she spoke, and I think it was, an enlightened master come to help me at that moment in the form of a hag. She had broken veins all on her face, and she was what to me looked like an absolute mess. And she told my story up to where I was at that moment, and then she went on. And I had that, the curtains parted, and I could see very clearly what was ahead of me. And I remember I rushed out onto Lexington Avenue, and I went into the nearest bar, and I knocked back another drink. And the following day, I went to a meeting, and I walked in, and I said, I'm here for myself. Now, I didn't understand what all that meant. I didn't understand that I was a drunk and that I needed sobriety. I didn't understand, that I didn't want to drink. I don't know, I used to say I used to use the term I came into AA, and I still use that term because, I just speak English and that's what I use. But the truth is, I didn't come into AA. I was brought in here. I absolutely was brought in here. And the arrogance of my beginning, I used to think to myself, well, good God, I'm so fortunate to come into Alcoholics Anonymous because I can see, I'm not stupid, I can see that I'm the sort that has tendencies towards alcoholism. I can see that if I don't watch it, I will develop alcoholism. And aren't I clever that I have nipped this in the bud? And I thought that I was lightly dipped in alcoholism, that I had a dusting of alcoholism, that I didn't really need this like the rest of you, because I wasn't so bad. I'd caught it. I'd caught the problem. And I used to end my story on that Sunday afternoon. And then I would talk about my sobriety and carry on. And when I was 15 years sober, I went through the worst pain I have ever known in my life. I sunk to depths of pain that I had no idea existed. And I think before that time I had a lot of spiritual arrogance. I know how to get out of pain. You work with newcomers. You read the big book. You do all that stuff that is told us. Well, sometimes there comes a time, if you're the spiritually arrogant like me, I knew how it worked. I knew what to do. And there comes that time when all that flies out the window. The big book went. My sponsees became my sponsors. There was no working with newcomers. I couldn't touch it. I just couldn't touch it. And I was given a few things at that time. One of the things I was given was I was left with my smart feet. And my feet took me to meetings, and I screamed and I cried and I carried on. And people would say, she's got how long? 15 years? 16 years? 17 years? 18 years? And she's acting like that? Jesus, I don't want what she's got. And the second thing I was given remembrance of my last drink. I'd always ended my story with that Sunday, but I knew I'd had another drink after that. But it wasn't actually a drink. It was a sip of alcohol. So I never really counted that. It was like, it was so sort of like It wasn't a drink. It wasn't like that thunderous drinking of that Sunday in the shower. It was just a sip. But it was a very important thing that I remembered, that last sip of alcohol. Because I'm an alcoholic, and it doesn't matter whether I take a sip of alcohol or whether I'm drinking carafes of it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much I ingest, the quantities I ingest. It's the attitude of all in my mind and whatever it is that leads to that. And 9 days after I came into Alcoholics Anonymous on that Monday morning, actually, I was down in Washington on business. And after the business, I was with my associate and we were at someone's house for dinner. And they poured a glass of wine. There were about maybe 5 or 6 of us at the dinner table. And they poured this wonderful goblet of wine, red wine. And I didn't know enough to say, no thank you. I didn't know how to say, I'm sorry, I don't drink. Could you please take that away? I didn't know how to pick it up and put it away. I thought the whole idea of Alcoholics Anonymous was to learn how to resist alcohol. I thought that I was supposed to develop whatever it was to be cool around alcohol. That I was supposed to be able to be with people that were drinking and say, no, it doesn't bother me. Please, go right ahead. I was supposed to somehow, I don't know what else to say, to resist it, to be all right in the world. I'm in Alcoholics Anonymous now. No, it doesn't matter. In fact, I'll serve alcohol. I didn't understand the magnificence of and the mystical thing of surrender. I didn't get it. And so I resisted the alcohol. I resisted this goblet of wine through salad, through the main course, through dessert even. And then they were sitting around chatting and having coffee. And then this goblet of wine started talking to me. And it said to me, oh, Lorna, you're always so bloody dramatic. What are you doing in Alcoholics Anonymous for your simple problem? I mean, you always go overboard. Your problem is you need to lose 10 pounds, you know? Why don't you read? You've never read the classics, you know? Why don't you go to the gym? Why are you blaming me? I'm on your side. Don't you always feel better when we're together? Don't you always feel prettier? You feel like you're able to speak better? I'm not against you. I'm with you. The problem is, why do you always guzzle? Why do you always have to knock it back? And are the other people at this dinner table, are they weeping and telling each other intimate details of their private life? No, they're not doing that. They're acting very reasonably and they're sipping their alcohol. Why can't you be like them? And I said, you're absolutely right. And I reached out my hand and I took that goblet, which by this time, of course, had become, some sort of spiritual liquid, and sacramental wine, and I took a sip of it. And whereas 9 days before, that whole carafe of vodka and orange juice had made my soul feel uplifted and all right, this sip of alcohol hit my soul, and my soul went into absolute terror. And it was as though these huge doors were coming across the film of my life, and they were going to shut with this inevitable irretrievable thud. And I was going to be on one side, and you were going to be on the other. And it was you I didn't want to be separated from. I didn't know about sobriety. I didn't understand not drinking. I didn't know anything. I just knew there was you. And that you were on some kind of a path, and I wanted to be with you. And I felt like an astronaut severed from the mothership and sort of floating out into endless space. And it was such a terrifying thing for me, that thing of being cut off. And I think it's the fundamental spiritual thing that's sort of under layers and layers of our consciousness, that it's the whole thing of the Garden of Eden and everything. It's very primitive. We don't want to be cut off from a source, and that's the way I felt. And I came back on the train the following day to New York, and I wept all the way back, and I said to God, please let me back in. Please, please let me back in. I don't understand this thing of a day at a time. Obviously, a day at a time isn't going to work for me, because in the day I picked up a drink. I need a covenant forever. And I just didn't understand anything. Anyway, I came back to New York, and I threw my bag in the office, and I went to this meeting called Lenox Hill. And in those days, Lenox Hill had a certain kind of reputation as the silk stocking meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I walked in and I sat in the front row. And I think God wanted to test me immediately. And this fellow came up to me and he said, you can't sit there. He said, Harriet and Henry, whatever their names were, he said, have been coming to this group for the last 20 years, and they always sit in that seat. And he said, you can't sit there. And I can't remember very much about this chap, except that he was the sort, he had on trousers with little spuming whales embroidered in the. And I said to him, I don't care who sits here, I'm here now and I'm not leaving. And that was 21 years ago, and I haven't left yet. But I would say, I will say, that I've sat in different seats, and I just want to give that plug for sitting in different seats. If you go to your group and there's a chair, and they always say, that's Fred's chair, or that's Susan's chair. They always sit there, or you always do sit in the same place. For God's sakes, sit in a different seat in the room. See the speaker from a different point of view. See the room from a different angle. If we can't change our view in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, what the hell hope is there for us outside to do anything else? And I feel that that's really the essence of one of the great tools of my sobriety has been change, 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 change. It was drummed into me in the beginning that if I kept changing, I would keep on leaping ahead of the disease, and that would be, and I always say to people, whatever you do, whatever I do as a habitual thing, no matter what it is, if I keep doing it the same way, if I leap out of bed every morning and fall on my knees and do it habitually over and over again, and I never bring any kind of breath of difference or freshness into that, it's a hidden bottle. If I just do this thing, no matter how noble I say it is, and it's automatic, if I leap out of bed every morning and I get on my knees, for God's sakes, Lorna, do something different. Open the window. Pray out of the window. Do something. Stand in the middle of the room and pray. Just do something differently. If I always wear my hair this way, wear it somewhere, in the beginning we're told, walk down the street a different way, drive to work a different way, brush your teeth with the other hand, just do something differently. And so that was my beginning in the program. And That was my experience. One of my greatest strengths was that I have had a diet of 2 meetings a day for all this time. And there have been many times when I've not been able to go to that many meetings. I've been abroad or somewhere, but going to meetings has always been the primary thing in my life. And everything else has sort of fanned out from that. A great tool for me was my sponsor. I got a sponsor. It was just so wonderful because I couldn't get a hold of my drinking. She didn't make me talk about my drinking. She talked to me, she seduced me into AA because she would say to me things like, Lorna, if you stay with us, you can have a life that will be like having a quiver of golden arrows on your back. And when you come into a situation in life that you're not too sure how to handle, you will be able to reach back, select the perfect arrow, put it in your bow, and hit bullseye every time. And the idea of hitting bullseye was so intoxicating to me. I never hit bullseye. I went into miniskirts the year Max's came out. I was always wrong. I was always laughing at the wrong time. I was the sort that was wearing plunging necklines at funerals. Alcoholics were always whining and we're always saying, I always felt like I never fit in. I never felt like I fit in. Well, guess what? We don't. And I was just wrong. And I wondered when I came into this program how you could tell I was a newcomer. How you did things like you kept patting me on the back and saying, you keep coming back, you're in the right place. And actually, I had all sorts of different feelings when I came in, but I walked in and I thought I added great tone and class to Alcoholics Anonymous. I thought that you took one look at me and you thought to yourselves, well, thank God Lorna has arrived. Thank God Lorna is among us because now we can hold our heads up high and we don't have to be quite so anonymous because she is with us. And the truth of the matter was that I was wearing the same dress that I'd been wearing for the last 3 months. It wasn't that I didn't have any other clothes. I just couldn't be bothered to put another outfit together. It was just too much. And I had my hair, I wore gobs of makeup, just gobs of it. And I didn't take it off at night. I was sort of like Elizabeth I. I just put more on every day. And I was festooned in jewelry. I looked like a Christmas tree. I had masses of jewelry all over the place. So I can see myself walking in the doors so many times. And I had half an inch of coal around my eyes, black. I looked like a quarterback for the New York Giants or something, or a raccoon. But I had this idea that my eyes were very tiny and you couldn't see them, so I put all this black makeup around to make them stand out. It's a wonder I didn't have arrows on my face, saying, eyes this way. But it was an indication, I think, that I was disappearing. I felt like I was disappearing. And I had this huge kind of presence, and I would walk, and of course I came in, and I couldn't wear a coat like everyone else. I had to wear a cape. And I came in, I'd fly down center aisle as they were reading the preamble, and all the ashtrays would be bouncing on the chairs and things. And I remember one time one guy saying, well, we'll all wait till Lorna gets settled down. And but here I had this, I'd walk in like that, and if you'd come up to me and you'd said to me, hey sister, who do you think you are? I'd be like, I don't know, who do you think I am? There's such a dichotomy of feelings. And And my strength is that I followed suggestions. I was so desperate to have the high road. And that's what was held out to me. So it wasn't sobriety that was held out to me. I was sort of conned into that. It was the high road. And I knew my life was shabby. That's something I did know. I knew I had a very shabby, second-rate life. And tawdry, as only sort of like a woman's life can be. And icky, and mucky, and embarrassing, and I wanted the high road. I wanted first class. I worked in, I was the first woman art auctioneer in America. I worked for a very prestigious art auction company. And I think the only reason they didn't let me go was this accent. I think that's the only reason, you know. And we all have something that keeps us, you know, we've all got some angle. And that was mine. And but I was absolutely outrageous in that. You know, there's a certain uniform that everyone has for their job. If you're a filmmaker, maybe you wear jeans and an open neck shirt. If you're a bank clerk, you wear a suit. And there was a certain kind of uniform to the work I was doing. And I would come into work dressed, I'm talking 21 years ago, 22 years ago, and I had green and black alternate nail polish. I didn't wear mini skirts, I wore skating skirts, and I was a dancer also in my spare time, and I would, instead of walking around the counter to see clients, I would jeter over the counters and showing all my underwear and things, and I was not quite the material that went along with this job, and so my sponsor sort of taught me behavior and manners, and that was one of the great strengths too of good manners in Alcoholics Anonymous. Always go up and thank the speaker. Always put money in the basket. Never ever let the basket pass by without contributing something. Don't be reading newspapers in meetings, or sit there and listen to the speaker and pay attention, and all that kind of stuff, that kind of high road quality stuff. And I was told to get the alcohol out of my house, and I fought it. And but I didn't fight it, but I said to her, I have some very fine bottles of wine in the house. Do you want me to get rid of that? She said, yes. And I said to her, well, look, if I suddenly found out I was allergic to diamonds, would you ask me to get rid of those? And she said, listen to you comparing wine with diamonds. And and some people, some AAs might say, well, just because I've stopped drinking doesn't mean to say I want to impose that on my friends. And when my friends come by, I want to be able to offer them a drink. But people that don't smoke don't keep cartons of cigarettes in the house for their smoking friends that come by. And Orthodox Jews do not keep ham and Swiss cheese in the house for their Gentile friends that drop by. And I have yet to go to someone's house and they say, well, and there'd be like some, cocaine and works on the coffee table, and they say, well, we don't shoot up, but maybe you'd like to, So, and I was told that any alcoholic that has alcohol in the house, no matter for what reason they say it's there, it's got their name on it. And when I went through that hell that I went through, I was very glad that I had taken notice of that tool, because if alcohol had been in the house, I definitely would have drunk it. And so I just want to put a plug in for the beginning tools. It's not so necessary maybe in the beginning that you want those tools, but you need to develop that toolbox, because you never know down the road when later you're going to need that. So there were many other strengths that my sponsor taught me, and hungry, angry, lonely, and tired, taking me through all the steps, getting me to see. And I would say, for anyone in the room that's new, that it took me over 2 years of sobriety to get in touch with my story, to really understand my drinking, to really understand that I hadn't nipped this in the bud at all, that I was riddled with alcoholism. And that I had thought when I came in that, maybe I'd been bad for a few years, and this years and that years, and then I realized, that I had come down the assembly line of heaven, and I think that God said, this time you're going to love me. This time you're going to turn to me. This time I love you so much. This time I want you to want me as much as I want you. And as I came down, he stamped me alcoholic. And I don't think I had a chance, I think I should have been taken from the delivery room to a meeting room. And I was, anyone that had any kind of perception could have looked at me when I was 3 years old and said, that one definitely has a problem. And so my experience and my strength. And my experience in Alcoholics Anonymous has been rather extraordinary. There are those, I think, that we fall into maybe 3 general categories. And this is very, very general. I'm just saying this is not true. It's just an observation. There are those of us that come in and we haven't picked up a book in God knows how long. And, we come in and suddenly we're taking all sorts of courses and we're alcoholism counselors, within a couple of weeks. And then there are those that come in as physical wrecks, smoking, eating masses of sugar, God knows what, and we're out today running the marathon, and then you get the types like me that come in and we go balmy on the spiritual. And I just, that was my particular Achilles heel, was I went with the spiritual. And I have done everything practically in seeking the spiritual, and the greedy, spiritual greed. And but the one thing that's kept me anchored is I've always been in AA, and I've often shared in AA, and I've had people sort of raising their eyes and saying, like, oh God, there she goes again. And I was away on a very extended retreat, and I once heard the essence of spiritual life. This guy said that he had also been a seeker, and he was going to tell us what spiritual truth was. And I can remember sitting a little higher on my cushion and a little more attentive and a little more in position to hear this great truth. And I've bathed in Galilee. I've kissed the site of the true cross. I have been in Bodh Gaya, where the Buddha got his enlightenment and sat under the Bodhi tree. I've fasted for 40 days. I've meditated in silence for 90 days. I've been in the Sinai. I've helped lepers. I've cleaned ashtrays at AA meetings. I've buried the dead. I've done all sorts of things. And I thought, here it is. I'm going to find out exactly what it is. And he said, if it's not one thing, it's another. And and I think that's the truth. I always think in sobriety, well, I'll get this and then I'll be all right. Or I'll understand this, or I'll read this particular book, or I'll meditate in this way, or I'll chant in that way, and then I'll know, and then I'll have, or I'll do a complete 4th step. That's the big trap. Or I will do a total 9th step. and then I'm going to feel all right. And if it's not one thing, it's another. There's something else comes looming up. And there are just a few things I would like to share. Glenn asked me to tell this story. I'm only telling this story because Glenn asked me to. I was on one of my things. I went into the Sinai. I was just happened to be in the Sinai, and yes, I thought, well, I won't go there. I'll go to the Sinai. So anyway, I'm in the Sinai, and I needed to get somewhere, and the only way to get there was on a camel. And so I got this Bedouin to take me on a camel, and the two of us are riding on this one camel. And we're out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, that's what it is. And he sort of slides off the camel, and he says to me in broken English and Arabic, he says, "The camel knows the way." And he gives me the reins to this camel. And he starts walking off. And I'm like horrified. I'm absolutely horrified and terrified that this guy is disappearing, and I'm in the desert all by myself on this beast. And I start yelling at him, but in this very muted tone, "Where the hell are you going? Don't leave me here." Because I didn't want to say it too loudly in case it meant in camel language, "Giddy up, full speed ahead." So he goes. He disappears over a dune, and I am just in absolute terror. And the Sinai, there's parts of the Sinai that it's sand, and there's nothing as far as the eye can see, and it's not like an American desert, where there's birds flying overhead and little creatures popping out of holes and things. I mean, it's dead. And so I go through this incredible feeling of terror. And the camel I'm on, and camels aren't very pleasant creatures, and they're very high up. You can't sort of slide off it and then leap back on. And the camel I was on, most camels have very sort of romantic, wonderful Arabic names like Muhammad or Salim or Rashid or something like that. And my camel was called Bob Marley. And so there's a camel with the name of a Jamaican reggae singer, and I think I'm getting the high sign. So it says, and then I went through this thing of spiritual arrogance. I thought, well, Lorna, of course you're in the desert by yourself. Isn't this where God brings all his favorite people to talk to them? Isn't this where he talked to Moses here, and he talked to Jesus in the desert one over from here, and he's going to give you a message that you can take back to them. And so I'm waiting for this message, and nothing happens, of course, and the only message I got was I should have covered myself a little more. It was very hot. And anyway, 2.5 hours later, Bob Marley and I arrive at our destination. And I learned, this whole thing of going on the journey, of the terror of being abandoned. And I want to say, you've never done the third step until you've been on Bob Marley in the Sinai by yourself. The thing of total surrender, spiritual arrogance, and then the ordinariness and the ploddingness of the journey, and the journey coming to a close, and then the having to do it over again because I had to go back. So I can see that Eileen's moved in the front here, but still I have a few more minutes, so I'm going to take my time. I wanted to share in the closing of my story. There's many ways I like to close, but this is it being Sunday and all that, and I want to share this. that very often, alcoholics, we will say that we're terrified of intimacy, that we don't know how to be intimate and we don't know how to have intimate relationships, and that it's a difficult thing for us. And there is a certain kind of intimacy that is difficult for us. But I believe that we are some of the most intimate people I've ever known. I always remember taking a sponsee to the airport. She was returning to Australia, and I knew every detail about this girl's life, and I had to turn to her in the bus and I had to say to her, "Robin, what's your last name?" And I didn't know her last name, but I knew all sorts of other things, and we are very intimate with people. And, one of my favorite people, well, my very favorite people in all the world is Jesus. And I love to talk about stories of Jesus and weave it into my thing. And I know you can mention Jesus in an AA meeting and clear the room. But when Jesus was on his cross, there was crucified with him a couple of other fellows. And this was, we're told, Jesus' finest hour. This was what he had come to do. I don't think he had necessarily come to be crucified, but he had come to just keep on doing the next thing in front of him and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And it was his big moment. And I always say, that if it had been me, first of all, going through Jerusalem carrying my cross, if that had been, and there was a time when he dropped his cross, and how very often do we all drop our crosses and we need help. And some Roman soldiers said to a visitor in Jerusalem that day, "Help him with that thing." And if it had been me, I would have said, "Hey, look, this is my crucifixion. I want to do this. Get your hands off my cross, I'm going to do this all by myself. I don't care how many times I fall down." And anyway, there was a fellow crucified with him, and in the middle of their agony, he turned to Christ and he said to him, "Lord, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus did not turn to him and say, "Can't you see I'm in the middle of a profound spiritual experience? I am busy. I have to concentrate on what I'm doing because it's a very intense time in my life, and I'm going to expire, and then I'm going to rise from the dead and sit at the right hand of the Father, and I hope you make it, buddy." He didn't say that at all. In this finest, biggest moment of his life, he intimately turned to that man, figuratively speaking, and he said to him, "This day you will be with me in paradise." And when I walked through the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, you did not say to me, "We are on the 6th step tonight, and we are very busy involved in that. Hope you make it, sister. You look a right mess." You didn't. You gave me a cup of coffee, and you didn't hold out. You didn't say, "Well, when you have a certain amount of time, or when you have this, or when you have that, then we'll give you the real jewels of Alcoholics Anonymous." You said, "These are the steps we took. Sit down and be with us. This day you can be with us in paradise." And you intimately included me in your life and your process. And I want to thank you all for going to meetings, for calling your sponsors, for reading the steps, for sponsoring others, for putting money in the basket, for getting the alcohol out of your house, for doing all the things you do that contribute to a classy, elegant, first-class way of life. Because if you weren't here and you weren't doing the things you do, I would have absolutely nowhere to go, and those doors would have closed inevitably and irretrievably on the doors on my life. So thank you very much for your sobriety. Thank you.